Welcome to AWAKEN podcast. My name is Olga Sitnik. I'm the founder and CEO of AWAKEN, the network state of the natural capital. In this podcast, we are rethinking the ownership of the nature, we are looking in the future of the sustainability markets, and we are a little bit changing the paradigm, how the world is looking at the climate change and preserving the planet and preserving the nature. So today we're gonna talk about the ownership over the nature. We have one paradigm that we never dare to doubt. We all know that if we look on the global scale, the global natural resources, and I mean forests, rivers, oceans, glaciers, wetlands, the natural assets of the world are owned 70% by the states, 30% by the indigenous communities, about 15% goes to private ownership, and about 5% is still without the identified ownership. So this is how we used to think. For us, it's okay and normal and kind of obvious that the communities or the country, which is the state, would be the owner of the natural resources. But it was never like this, or it just became recently like this. So let's look back what was happening in the past, because for thousands and 10,000s of years, the nature actually was not the commodity. It was not the possession. The indigenous communities or the people who lived in the earth before, I mean before the 16th century when the colonization started, they were treating the land and the nature totally differently. For them, the nature was the partner. For them, the nature was actually the living creature, if we are talking about the cosmology of the indigenous communities, and it was never the possession. So when we start possessing the nature started with the colonization. So from 16th to 19th century, the small rain is starting. Okay, we will try to continue the podcast. The weather in jungle is never predictable. So from 16th to 19th century, when we start, not we, the Europeans, we start conquering the world, the term terra nulla or zero land appeared, meaning that if territory is formally not owned by no one, it can be conquered. So then from the 20th century, we start developing what we understand now as the ownership over the forests, oceans, rivers, when it became one of the biggest capitals, how from the Industrial Revolution and on, the world was developing. Because from the Industrial Revolution, from the late 19th, 20th century, we were exploiting. So we start possessing the land, we start exploiting the land, we start extracting natural resources, building our fabrics, and the whole new era, or we call it the first, second industrial revolution started. So the nature became a possession. So what is the problem, Olga, with the ownership of the nature, you would ask me? Why we are actually talking about this? Well, the problem is that the ownership of the nature is equal for now to decide what you will do with this piece of nature, what you would do with the forest. Would you cut it? Would you preserve it? Would you put it for conservation? Or the same with the river. Would you extract the oil close to the river and pollute it, or what you would do? Then I will go back a little bit to my experience in the indigenous communities that I was traveling or living with, because the past 5 years I'm living in the Amazon rainforest in Peru, but of course I was traveling through Brazil, through Colombia, and I spent a lot of time with indigenous people, learning from them and knowing their cosmology. So the first thought came to me when I was in the Kanamari indigenous tribe. I'm starting getting a little bit wet of the rain, which is deep in the Brazilian rainforest. And this is the small tribe of 300 people who are totally abandoned by the state, who barely can protect their land with the sticks, and to make their local budget, they are having the donation from each family $1 per month, at least for their chief to be able to go to the nearest city to discuss some matters from behalf of the community. So in this community of the indigenous people, we were spending some time, and we were spending some evenings, obviously with the candle, because there's no light as in most of the indigenous communities which are far away. So within the light candle, the chief of the community, he was saying to me, listen, Olga, I will show you something. Like it was so important to them. And he brought the big maps and the papers and the documents. And then I realized that this small Kanamari tribe, indigenous communities, they are the owners, the legal owners with the title of 200,000 hectares of the land of the Amazon rainforest. Well, I don't know if you can imagine, but it's like 200,000 football fields, for example. So this is the huge territory where their ancestors live. It's actually very interesting how is defined by the government which territory belongs to which indigenous group. So the territory is as far or as big as they can historically prove that on this territory that their ancestors lived. And usually it's proved by some diggings of some piece of dishes, of vases, that they can prove that exactly this indigenous group was living there. Well, so this small tribe had 200,000 hectares of the land in their possession, not being able to guard it, even though they were all calling themselves, if you ask them, okay, indigenous people, who you are? Most of them will say that we are the guardians of the rainforest. So they understand that their mission is to guard and preserve. And you know, they can keep the perfect balance. For example, when we were in the Kanamari tribe, even though those people have like no money to survive, they were saying, you know, Olga, we can now get this kind of fish, because if we get it, we already got too much. So the natural balance will be distributed. So we are not doing this. So those people know perfectly how to live in harmony and balance with the nature. So I was thinking, you know, if the Amazon rainforest, the biggest natural and one of the most important natural resources in the planet, is basically owned by the indigenous communities who cannot afford to guard them because they just don't have the resources. So why we don't just buy it? Why we don't just buy it all? Those people who want to preserve the planet, in order to be able to inject the finances and in order to be able to help them to protect it. So this was my first brilliant idea, as I thought at that time. I was dreaming that we can just buy it all. We can just buy oceans, rivers, forests, and protect them. Because who is taking the decision? The owner. We already discussed it. But then I ran into some problem. Then I came to the Amazon rainforest in Peru and I started purchasing the forest land by myself. The place we're here now in the AWAKEN resort, in the AWAKEN hub, I bought the 35 hectares of the land and I was buying the land lot by land lot, but the bureaucracy is so extremely hard. And this is not even the Europe, it's the Amazon rainforest jungle. You know, I was the vice governor of the region in Ukraine, and it's 50% covered with the forest, the Ivano-Frankivsk region. And I know how hard is the bureaucracy to even be able to rent or possess the forest. And in most of the countries, forests are not even able to possess. You can take it for the concession or the other forms of kind of rent, but it's very hard to have in the actual private ownership. So what we have? We have the forest owned by the countries or indigenous communities who are eligible to decide what to do with this land, and the bureaucracy is so hard that most of the people don't have access to own the land. And even if we could imagine, this is my other experience with the Kukama indigenous people, even if we could imagine we could have enough resources to buy the lands from the indigenous people to help them to preserve it, it's kind of impossible. You know what, I was, as I told you, in Kukama. I don't know if you are familiar with this, but a lot of indigenous people, they have their own languages, and in a lot of the languages, they don't have the future or the past. It's not possible to say something, I will do it, or I will go there, like future doesn't exist. They just live in the present moment. Moreover, they don't have the word I, they just have we. So it was very hard for me to start speaking with them the same language. I just didn't understand at first why, when I'm offering them, you know, we can develop, we can do this or that, promising them something like we would do in our civilization, they just they just didn't understand because future doesn't exist for them. The same as individualism, it doesn't exist. So at this point, and I was trying to purchase more land in the private ownership to preserve it, but obviously purchasing the land lot by land lot of 5-10 hectares wouldn't solve, so I wanted to be able to purchase a couple of thousands of hectares, but I run in this problem. You can't, because whatever you promise or whatever you say, they just know that this land is theirs, this is the present, and whatever happens in the future doesn't exist. So here are all my thoughts about purchasing the lands in the private ownership just broke until the other case came. So the other case, the story I heard actually was also about the Kukama. I heard about this in the same community I was. It was also about Kukamas, but women. So the Kukama women, they live por river Marañón. Rivers Ucayali and Marañón eventually are forming the great Amazon River. So the Marañón River is a very secret, scared place for the indigenous people. As you know, they're treating the rivers as the living beings, not even just as the piece of nature, but they're treating the river as their parents, as their mother, who is giving them everything they need. The Marañón River was highly polluted by the oil of one of the oil and gas companies, so the Kukama women started a fight against this pollution. And in 2021, they went to the court. And what is interesting, the court was lasting from the first level in 2021 until the final decision of the High Court in 2024. And the High Court made, for me, the revolutionary decision which was changing totally my perception of how we can own the nature. The decision was that, first of all, the Marañón River is the legal person. The legal person which has its rights. So basically the court, based on the indigenous cosmology, acknowledged the Marañón River as the living creature. Secondly, what the court did, the court appointed the indigenous women of Kukama, as the guardians, together with the Peruvian state, as the guardians and legal representatives of the Marañón River. For me, it's revolutionary because basically it's the first time in the legal history that the court separated ownership from the right to represent. And this totally changes all the landscape and imagination how the actually ownership of the nature can work. Basically, the court told and treated the river as the legal person who is not able, for some reason, to represent itself, and appointed Kukama women as their representative or guardian. I'm repeating this because this case is the key to what I called the GreenHold that I will explain you further. This is the totally new vision and the concept of being able globally to own the nature. So we have this precedent with the Kukama women and the new form, legal form, when the right to represent is divided or splitted from the right to own. This is where it was like the click. Then all the puzzles I was thinking about, they came together. So one of the key elements of the AWAKEN ecosystem is the GreenHold. GreenHold is the right to be able, without formally owning the natural asset, which means forest, river, ocean, wetland, or glacier, without the formal ownership, to be able to decide what will happen to this natural asset and to be able to use it exclusively in a sustainable way. So basically what we are doing, we're as well in this legal format using the precedent which happened with the Kukama women. We are dividing and we are saying that we can be able, without formally owning or possessing the nature, we are able to be the guardians and representatives and take the decision what will happen with this piece of nature. We have some forms, some legal forms, like for example concessions, which are kind of kind of creating the legal framework to the GreenHolds, because according to the concession agreements, normally the ownership is not changing, but someone has the long-term right to act like the owner on this land. In the GreenHolds, you have the long-term right to make the decisions, to guard, to receive all the financial benefits from this land, but exclusively in sustainable and regenerative manner. So this is the definition of the Greenhold, but let's go a little bit more further. Okay, but Olga, how to make it in the practice? Okay, so now when we have so developed digital ledger technologies, which means blockchain, smart contracts, cryptocurrencies, and artificial intelligence, we can actually bring to practice, which before was just the utopia or kind of economic theory without any legal practice. So the Greenhold legal model is constituting the way when you can obtain the contract when some legal vehicle, let's call it SPV, it's special purpose vehicle, which is normally using for the tokenization and which exists in not much, but in some jurisdictions, for example, Luxembourg, for example, Switzerland, for example, United Arab Emirates, for example, Singapore. So in these jurisdictions, you can create the special purpose vehicle or SPV, and you can sign the Greenhold contract with the government. For example, I create the SPV in Switzerland, and I sign from this SPV the Greenhold contract with the Loreto government, saying that I have the 50 years rights of Greenhold, means to take decisions, to guard, and to represent, for example, the Tamishquayo-Tahuayo Communal National Park, which is 500,000 hectares national park in the Amazon rainforest of Peru. Then the next step I'm doing, I am tokenizing, because this is what the legal structure of the SPV allows. I am tokenizing these rights according to this contract, putting it in the smart contract, obviously, and I'm listing it on the marketplace where it's available to purchase for whoever person. So basically, in this way, whoever in the world who wants to be the owner of the natural capital, who wants to be the owner of the piece of the Amazon rainforest, who wants to have the real power to decide what and how to preserve this piece of Amazon rainforest, can invest as little as, for example, $100 and receive this right. And this is not just changing the concept of the ownership of the natural assets or the forests or oceans and rivers, it actually changes how we as people who want to preserve the nature behave. Because before this, we could be, me, you, and we could be the activists, and the only form that we can express our activism, or how we can express our desire to preserve the nature, was to go and rally, and I was organizing a lot. I was even covering with my body the trucks which were trying to get out the wood from the illegal lodging. I was making the traps for illegal lodgers. I was doing everything using the tools of the old paradigm that the ecological activists are using, but is it really efficient? The question is, sometimes, I fight a lot. I having 15 years of fight for the against destroying the forests. Yeah, you receive some impact, but anyways, the forests are still more destroyed than preserved. So if we change it to the mechanism where you can, if you want to impact, you just become the owner, or not even the owner, because I want us to go away from the paradigm of possession, and I want us to think in the paradigm of representation and guardians of the nature. So this is what is the Greenhold concept of the awakened ecosystem, which is allowing us to obtain the right to decide for the nature, to obtain the right to become the guardians in this. And because of the blockchain and token and smart contracts and all the new digital ledger infrastructure, we can do this in the fractional way. So we don't need anymore to have some big foundation or investment fund or some big corporate structure to be able to do this. But we are able in one click, borderlessly, from any part of the world become the owners, co-owners, for example, of the Amazon rainforest, and co-manage it together with the state and together with the indigenous communities through the DAOs, which will be the other part of our podcast. So thank you a lot. If you want to know about more about Awaken Startup, please go to our website. Currently, we are developing 3 core projects that we are looking for the investments. So if you're interested to join to our community, please do so. And if you're interested to invest in the early stages of Awaken Startup, you're obviously very welcomed.